Atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where on behalf of the world's husbands and sons, we express our gratitude to the motherly class for putting up with us so admirably for so long. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radio. So good of you to join us this evening. Here is your golden age of Western civilization news roundup for the week ending 9 May 2025. Dateline Washington, Monday, 5 May. Pro-migration groups reacted with shock and outrage this week to President Donald Trump's plan to offer a $1,000 stipend and a free plane ticket to any illegal alien willing to self-deport in an orderly fashion. And they kind of give the whole game away there, don't they? Almost like this is going to take massive amounts of money out of their coffers, almost like they have a clear profit motive for trying to prevent the removal or even the voluntary self-removal of persons who are in the country unlawfully. In fact, if I didn't know better, I might suspect the only reason for these organizations existing in the first place is to enable and facilitate industrialized criminal activity. I might suspect these so-called migrant advocacy groups of being thinly veiled money laundering machines and human smuggling syndicates whose leaders have grown rich beyond the dreams of avarice on your tax dollars, of course, in partnership with the Democrat Party on a project that was conceived to be mutually beneficial to both parties. For the migrant NGOs, the more illegal aliens there are to move around the country and provide free services to, well, the more money they require for their operations. For the Democrats, the cause of remaking the demographics of the country by brute force social engineering and thus rigging all future elections in their own favor is advanced. And the reality of all this is beyond any reasonable doubt at this point, because we watched it happen from the very first moment that the corpse of Joe Biden was sworn in as president. Oh, he said he was all about border security. His DHS secretary, the enemy saboteur Mayorkas, who is an accessory in the deaths of around 500,000 Americans, went before Congress around a dozen times and swore under oath that he was engaged in a good faith effort to enforce our border security laws, which is weird because when their administration came in, the border wall had been fully funded, the material was already procured and stacked on site, and the first thing Biden did on his first day, well, he stopped building the wall that was fully funded and already in progress, and for the next 4 years, as something on the order of 15 million unknown individuals poured through the breaches in that wall that they created and then left unguarded, these same men told us, gosh, we are just doing our level best here to make that border secure, but it's just logistically impossible. We just can't do it without further acts of Congress. And how long did it take Donald Trump to fully secure the border without any such act of Congress? With the same budget that Biden and Mayorkas had, it took less than 30 days. And one more note on the enemy saboteur Mayorkas. That guy did not receive any pardon. The Republicans currently control the Congress, and there are a lot of us out here who now have grave sites instead of children, who would very much like to know when that evil black-hearted monster is going to be hauled before the Homeland Security Committee or the Oversight Committee or Christ, any damn committee, I don't care which one it is, to answer for his crimes. And if that never happens, then best of luck trying to rely on our votes in the midterms next year. Dateline Washington, Tuesday, 6 May. In a piece of very welcome news that arrives many decades overdue, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced this week his intention to get rid of 20% of the 4-star generals in the armed forces, which this reporter would submit is just a pretty good start. And why is it just a good start? Well, because up until the end of the Second World War, it was commonly understood and disputed by not really anyone that 4-star general ranks only need to exist in wartime and only need to be held by men who are commanding armies in the field. So up until the end of the Second War, or more precisely, up until the passage of the National Security Act of 1947, the highest rank you could theoretically hold in the peacetime U.S. Armed Forces was a 3-star, a lieutenant general, or a vice admiral. And as a practical matter, there were vanishingly few of those. If you spent your whole career in the peacetime Army or Navy, a 2-star rank was as high as you could reasonably hope to ascend. How many 4-star generals and admirals did we have at the end of the Second World War? We had 8. And additionally, we created a 5-star rank to which we elevated a further 9 men, which was only a function of the fact that we were running combined operations with the forces of the British Empire, so we needed a rank that was equivalent to Field Marshal so that we didn't have American commanders who were outranked by their British subordinates. The point being, we won the biggest war in world history with the biggest operational military force in world history with a grand total of 17 men of 4-star rank or above. And how many do we have today? We have 44 war. How many of those have ever commanded an army or an army group in the field? That would be 0. And take a look at a picture of any of our top WW2 commanders like Generals Eisenhower or MacArthur when they were Supreme Allied Commander in Europe and the Pacific respectively, and look at the size of their ribbon racks. You'll see maybe 7 or 8 ribbons, all of them for decorations earned in combat, and compare that to the chest full of participation ribbons that a political buffoon like General Mark Milley walks around with in the present day, a man who spent a grand total of 48 hours in combat 35 years ago. Participation ribbons, they are bad enough in the civilian world, and we don't need them in the military. Should you get an award and a ribbon for doing a job for a couple years without getting fired? No, you shouldn't. So let's start with 20% and then let's keep going. And if you were unclear about why the media Democrat complex is so desperate to take the scalp of Secretary Hegseth, well, stuff like this has a lot to do with it. Nothing infuriates a political career desk general more than having to work for a former captain, especially when it's a former captain who is likely to eliminate your cushy, low-pressure office job. So there is not any shortage of these guys who are willing to engage in anonymous smears against the new SecDef in the hopes that they can help force his ouster and thus save their fake jobs. It's a tale as old as time, really. Massive expansions of the administrative state and the managerial class isn't just something that happens in the civilian world, but there is just as urgent a need to put a stop to it once and for all. Dateline London, Wednesday, 7 May. The Labour Party government of Sir Keir and the Stormtroopers demonstrated once again this week that they are really good at organizing their national priorities. Now, if I asked you what the most pressing threat to the immediate safety of the British people is, a reasonable person might say something like, I don't know, your kid's getting stabbed to death at a birthday party by a Rwandan migrant? But you would be wrong. And also, you are a filthy xenophobic racist, and you might get yourself arrested for suspicion of having had that thought in your head. No, damn it. The most pressing danger to the British people is a Russian nuclear attack? Well, yes, that is in fact the stated position of Sir Keir and the Stormtroopers, who announced this week that for the first time since the end of the Cold War, they will revive and update a document called the Government War Book, which was created in the aftermath of the Second World War as a theoretical action plan for how best to respond to a Soviet strategic nuclear attack upon the British Isles. Now, why would Russia in the third decade of the 21st century have the slightest desire or inclination to launch a nuclear attack on such an insignificant former power as the United Kingdom? Unclear. But don't tell that to Sir Keir and the Stormtroopers, because they say this is very, very serious business indeed. And if your reasonable suspicion is to say, gosh, it sounds like they want people to be irrationally afraid of an external threat, so they spend less time thinking about how disastrously incompetent our government is on matters of everyday domestic policy. And if you're thinking that, well, you're probably not wrong, because it does seem a hell of a lot like that. Starting a war or raising the specter of a war to distract public attention from your own bad governance. It's one of the oldest tricks in the political book, really. Hell, Napoleon did it more than once. Saddam Hussein did it when he went to war with the Iranians in 79. The Argentines did it as recently as 1982. So look, ma'am, I'm sorry your daughter got gang raped by Pakistanis, but I'm afraid our officers are all quite busy chasing down racially insensitive social media posts at the moment. And besides, those Russian missiles, they might rain down at any moment. So would you please stop being so selfish and get your bloody priorities straight? And whatever you do, do not stand on the sidewalk and silently pray for deliverance from the nuclear Armageddon, because that's a public disorder offense, and we will have to pull an officer off of the racially insensitive social media beat to take you into custody on suspicion of thinking unfashionable religious thoughts. And nobody wants that. Dateline Boise and Salt Lake City, Thursday, 8 May. On this week's episode of Yes, We Do Have a State Religion, and our state religion is gay. The capital cities of Utah and Idaho, of all places, passed local ordinances this week conferring official city flag status on the various Skittle Vomit Rainbow Gay Pride banners whose display on public property and at government facilities was recently banned by the legislatures of those respective states. And if there is an overarching moral to this story right at the top, it's that even if you live in the reddest of red states, your big cities are, almost invariably, being run by left-wing wackos whose idea of effective civic governance is making everything just as gay as possible by any means at their disposal. Oh, you thought a city government's job was making sure the trash gets collected and the buses run on schedule? Well, think again. Bigot. A city government's job is passing pro-Hamas resolutions about how terrible Israel is and making sure you can't go anywhere without having celebrations of non-normative sexuality constantly shoved into your face whether you like it or not. And it's really quite remarkable that the incongruity of juxtaposing those two things together as your top priorities seems to still be utterly escaping these raving fanatics, because Islamic radicalism and militant homosexuality are just about the strangest bedfellows that can be imagined. Wearing a keffiyeh while waving a Skittle Vomit Rainbow flag, that makes about as much much sense as announcing that Jose Cuervo is your AA sponsor. It might even make less sense than that, come to think of it. If you want to tell the world you're totally clueless about everything without having to actually say any words, that's a pretty damn good way of doing it. But it's not just one Skittle Vomit flag that's having official status conferred on it, at least not in Salt Lake City, by God. They have adopted the Progress Pride flag, the Transgender Pride flag, and the Juneteenth flag as official banners of the city. Now, what is the difference between a Progress Pride flag and a Transgender Pride flag? I have no idea. I just know one is as ugly as the other, because these people only ever celebrate ugly things. What is a Juneteenth flag? Beats the hell out of me. All I know is I remember a time not all that long ago when Salt Lake City was so Mormon, you would be sure to get dirty looks in the grocery store if you had a 2-liter of Coca-Cola in your cart. You could be damn sure your bishop was going to hear about that transgression. And now, Salt Lake City has 2 official banners that celebrate acts that, to the best of my knowledge, the LDS Church still regards as mortal sins. And are we supposed to call this progress? Are we supposed to call it enlightenment? Because aren't we just swapping out one unofficial state religion for another unofficial state religion? Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall issued the following laughably dishonest statement on the passage of the various flag ordinances. Quote, "My sincere intent is not to provoke or cause division. My intent is to represent our city's value and honor our dear diverse residents who make up this beautiful city and the legacy of pain and progress that they have endured." End quote. And we hear a lot, the word values a lot from these people who seek to make the whole world gay. What do we never hear? Well, we never hear any attempt at explaining what those values actually are. What common community values exactly are advanced by forcing people to stare at a revoltingly ugly symbol of something they want no part of and don't wish to celebrate? And who knows, maybe one day we might have a functioning press again, and some intrepid journalist will get the wild idea of asking that screamingly obvious question. In any event, I think we can be assured that Joseph Smith and Brigham Young are turning cartwheels and back handsprings in their respective graves as we speak. Dateline San Francisco, Friday, 9 May. Tens of thousands of Bay Area commuters were left stranded Friday morning when BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, up and stopped working right before dawn, apparently because the software and infrastructure that runs the whole thing realized it is 52 years old. Yes, you heard right. They are still running these trains on the original software from 1972. Was software even a word yet in 1972? I don't think it was. And this is such a strange development because when Biden and the Democrats passed their big infrastructure bill, quote unquote, a couple of years ago, wasn't it supposed to fix things just like this? Didn't Joe stand up at the podium and mumble unintelligibly about how all of our dangerously outdated stuff was going to get repaired and upgraded and modernized and how great it was all going to be? Jim Eagle, I need you to do a quick check for me. How many pieces of infrastructure have actually been built or improved or renovated under the Biden infrastructure bill? I'll wait right here. I mean, I'm sure it's an exceedingly long list and it will be easy to find something. Oh, it's not? It's a short list then? Oh, there's nothing on it. There's 0 things. All right then. I mean, they give the bill a wildly misleading name just to obscure the fact that it was really a grab bag of free cash for corrupt left-wing NGOs? What a surprise this is. That's certainly never happened before. I mean, except with every single other spending bill that got passed while Biden was in office. Like, you remember how they spent $8 billion to build a nationwide network of electric car chargers? And they built a total of 8? Hey, at least they actually built something in that case, and only $1 billion a piece. It's better than they usually do. I mean, hell, they gave Stacey Abrams $2 goddamn billion to provide magic energy-efficient refrigerators to residents throughout rural Georgia, and nobody has ever seen a single one of the refrigerators, but the money all damn well got spent. The train service wound up not being restored in San Francisco until 9:30 a.m., by which time most commuters had been reduced to biking or walking to work or just going home altogether, as the local bus service quickly became inundated and overwhelmed, and they had to shut that down too. And what's the moral of the story? Well, we can always depend on our progressive friends to boldly lead the way forward from the 20th century to the 19th. And that's the end of the roundup for this week. So it is that time again when I toss it over to my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, a man who has made it his life's work to scour the whole state of Georgia in search of one of those Stacey Abrams refrigerators, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.